My guest today is writer-director Benjamin Verrall, who has always been drawn to the power and the mystery of the sea, a theme that resonates in his newest short film, Shouting at the Sea. Now, Benjamin has carved out a successful career in the media industry, and his journey led him to establish Toffee Hammer, a creative agency and production company that has gained recognition for its innovative storytelling and collaborative spirit. Now, his beautiful short film called Shouting at the Sea is about two friends, played by actors Harry Mitchell and Maddie Rice, where they reconnect after years apart and spend the day in the teenage haunts of the seaside town where they grew up. Now, witness to this human drama is the sea, voiced by Daisy Haggard, remains indifferent, yet its waves narrate a tale of memory, belonging, and vulnerability. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome writer, director Benjamin Verrall and his short film, Shouting at the Sea, to the show. Welcome, Benjamin.
Thank you, Ward, and thank you for a lovely introduction. It's great to be here. We've been, as a team, watching some of your interviews with other filmmakers, so I know him for a good ride today.
Well, thank you for watching the other interviews, but I will say this, I fell in love with Shouting at the Sea. So what was the inspiration behind this film, and was some of it biographical in nature?
Well, I wouldn't say it was biographical, but I would say that all of our team, so we're very collaborative at Toffee Hammer, and around about this time last year, I said, we need to have a project. We need to have a project that isn't for clients, and we need to do a film together. I had had this title, Shouting at the Sea, in my head for about 15 years, but I didn't know what to do with it. I grew up in a seaside town. I grew up in Hastings, where the film is set. And if you grow up in a seaside town, particularly in sort of the UK, where quite often seaside towns are a little bit run down, there will come a time when you feel the need to shout at the sea. It's just something, it's a rite of passage. It's something that everybody does, I think. And so I had this title, and I said to the team here at Toffee Hammer, let's make a short film. I've got this title, and I've got this image of this last scene in my head, which is of two characters just yelling at the sea in a form of catharsis or something like that. And it just so happens that all of the team at Toffee Hammer at the time grew up in seaside towns. So not Hastings, but we all had different experiences growing up. So when I said it's not biographical, I'd say that it is biographical, but it's biographical of lots of different inputs rather than one particular input. So I wrote a first draft of the screenplay, and then the whole team went to Hastings, and we just sort of went around all of my teenage haunts. They were my teenage haunts, of course, but and then just discussed the characters, and the film sort of grew organically from that. The first draft is very different from the final draft, and I think that's due to the way in which we work as a team here at Toffee Hammer. I hope, I'm told, that the younger female character is quite authentic and believable, and that is very much in testament to having younger female co-writers on the project, because they did take me to task at some stages to make sure that particular story rung true to them, because they've all grew up in seaside towns. Some of them have left their seaside towns, some of them have returned to their seaside towns. So it's the sea, it's about nostalgia, it's also about growing up, and it's about friendship. And I think because the film was born out of friendship, that also comes across really well in the film, far better than I would have expected it to.
It does. And the thing that I found with the story, it's very in depth. It's very authentic. It's conversations that really happen. And but I want to start off, before we get into the film, I want to start off with your stellar cast. You had Harry Mitchell, Maddie Rice, which I recognized right off, and of course, the narration was done by Daisy Haggard. What was the casting process like?
Wow. It was an interesting process. When we had got the script to where we wanted it to be, um, we knew that the characters had to be able to pull off very naturalistic dialogue. And the actors had to be brilliant. I mean, that's the honest truth. You know, without brilliant actors, the film would fail. And we knew Harry's work a little. He's made a brilliant film himself called Chubby Funny, which he's wrote, directed, and starred in, which is brilliant if you want to have a look at that. But so he came on our radar, and we auditioned him first. And the brilliant thing about Harry is that he totally understands the idea of humour being part of tragedy, and tragedy being part of humour. You know, when we're, you know, the particular audition speech we chose could have been read very, very dramatically, but he did it with such a light touch and such charm and beauty and humour that we knew, you know, we found our Harry. And how better to find somebody who matches Harry in terms of experience and just expertise in the acting field than to ask him who he recommended. And he recommended Maddie, and we met Maddie, and again, absolutely blown away by her. And together, I think they've got amazing chemistry. So, you know, like everything with films, you plan, and then so much of it's to do with luck. You know, they were both available during the short window of time that we were available, and they gave it their all, and I can't fault them. They were just such a pleasure to work with on set. They also are both writers. Maddie's an exceptional writer as well, and I think that really helped because they were sensitive to our writing, first of all, and also because where occasionally there was a slightly, you know, a note or one line that didn't quite feel right, they could talk to me as a fellow writer and say, you know, have you thought about maybe cutting this line? And they were so charming about it that I just like, yeah, okay, we'll cut it. If you can't say it, that's fine. And I have to say, you know, I didn't miss any of the lines that weren't included. So they obviously were good script editors as well as actors, I think.
You know, and ladies and gentlemen, if you are an actor, this is a film to study. The acting was absolutely amazingly incredible. And like you said, Harry brings this light touch. And it's the way that he speaks, the way he carries his lines, the way he pauses and paces. There is it's this beautiful dance between the two characters, Joe and Katherine. And I have seen so many short films, and a lot of them can be non-dialogue, very, very sparse dialogue. And then you come across a film like this one where the actors truly have to be at their absolute best and dive deep to pull out what is inside to bring this type of character to life. And we don't see a whole lot of roles today where actors are acting these types of roles, which is why I fell in love with this film. I love the simplicity of the story. Two people reconnecting with a vulnerability that they each had of their own. But I like the way, Benjamin, that as you're watching it and you're involving yourself into their day, their conversations, it's almost like they're walking a bit on eggshells because they've reconnected after years. So it's like walking on eggshells, but waiting for the right time to bring things up from their past friendship that were either cute or even uncomfortable. To me, that added the exceptional beauty to this film storyline.
Thank you. I mean, it's delightful to hear that criticism. I mean, we've seen, it's funny. We're right at the start of our festival journey. We got into Holly Shorts, I think you may know. So we're screening there. Sorry, in August. But we've really not had that audience reaction yet. So to hear it from you is lovely. And of course, I agree, and I can agree because I think that it really is so much to do with those just exceptional actors. One of the things that I said to them, it's the cliche, isn't it, that acting is reacting. Yet, this was when we were editing the film, it was pure joy because I was never cutting around anything. I was always trying to find the very best take. And that means that, when I say the very best take, they were all brilliant takes. So it became a real interesting thing to work out where it's dialogue. So, by its very nature, a lot of it's shot reverse shot. But we didn't always cut where you think you would cut normally. Like, for example, I don't know whether you will remember, but the last scene on the beach, there's quite a long bit of dialogue from Katherine, which is very deep, and you would think the person to be on throughout that entire speech was Katherine. But actually, it works so much better when you're just watching Harry's face because he's in character and he's 100% listening, and listening is something that you so rarely see on film done beautifully, I think.
Oh, you were so right, because with the dialogue coming from Maddie playing Katherine, and you're right, it's long dialogue, but that dialogue is so vital to this whole film because they're talking about something that is a little bit uncomfortable, very vulnerable, and to have someone acting where you truly feel and pick up that they're listening. And the thing about acting but being a listener is that you've got to make it believable, where you're just not standing there in a scene and blank face. But no, Harry didn't deliver that. He brought that character Joe to life, and and in a way, Maddie put him on the spot in which he had to answer some things. And we felt that. As an audience, I felt that. On top of that, you did a masterful job on intertwining Daisy Haggard's narration as the sea and Joe and Katherine's reconnection. Where did you get the idea of the sea doing the narration?
Well, that's an interesting thing. So I think from the very first draft, there was always poetry in the film. And the sea sort of narrates this. It's kind of like a counterpoint to the story. So they're not telling the story of Joe and Katherine. They're telling the story of the sea, of seaside towns, of I sort of imagine the sea's been there before us. It's going to live on after us. It's seen it all. And so to have this sort of not a wise old sea, but just a sort of almost like indifferent sea. I think that's the thing. It's just sort of like they're just narrating life rather than narrating the story exactly.
Yeah, and you know what, Benjamin? And there's that moment, and it's the perfect moment in which you're talking about where the sea is not forcing the narration. Mm-hmm. It's filling in the gaps of Joe and Katherine's story. I had to go back and replay this scene a few times, and it's one of the most beautiful narrations in this film, and probably one of the most beautiful lines. And in a way, if it was a song, I would call it a chorus, because Daisy says, Over and over, the waves surge forth and retreat, advancing and withdrawing in an endless dance, brought together and pulled apart, forever connected, never one. I had to replay that a few times until it finally hit me. Forever connected, never one, which that one line played a part towards the ending in the film.
Yes. Yes. I mean, Daisy Haggard's narration is sublime as well. I mean, we had to. She was the last person we cast because we want. We were working. We were fitting this in between commissioned work anyway. So we had Lily, who works with us, did a guide narration for a long time, and it was funny because you get used to the guide narration, and her narration was pretty good. So then we had to get somebody really brilliant to say the lines and to say them again. It's that subtle thing because I think what Daisy does to the performance is she really elevates the poetry in a way that isn't hackneyed. It's not. She's not giving a theatrical performance with it. She just is letting her beautiful voice say the words and picks up that rhythm of the sea and the conversation and everything. I think she does such a brilliant job for us.
She did. The thing that I'm happy that you chose a female to do the narration instead of a man. It added a softness and it added a delicateness to the story because of the conversations that Joe and Katherine are having throughout the film. At the end of that one part in the film, it's 8-minute, 34-minute mark. I literally write this stuff down. And I went back and I replayed I went to 8:34 and I kept playing it, and just listening, because then there's no voice. All you hear is the sea. And it's literally like breathing in and out. And I loved it. I actually thought it added to the film.
Oh, I know exactly. I'm slightly nerdy myself, so I do know exactly the time code that you're talking about. And it is, I have to say, this is, I really want to give a shout out to our sound designer, Tom Dalton, who basically constructed what sounds like a completely naturalistic soundscape throughout. But we edited it all with just the dialogue track, and those scenes, the scenes that you're talking about, with the unbelievable. I mean, I've watched it a few times, as you could imagine, but I love that close up with the glistening sea, and it just, that's lovely. Yeah, so I do know exactly the part that you're talking about in the film, and it's a very beautiful shot, close-up shot that Tom, our cinematographer, found for us just at magic hour, and the sea comes over the pebbles, over the single beach, and then just gently comes away, and it's just a beautiful shot anyway. And then, but we had it in the film mute, and Thomas Dalton, our sound designer, found, I don't know how he did it, he found literally the most perfectly timed sound effect. You would never know that it wasn't part of the diegetic sound.
Oh no, it is spot on, because you and I both know that when the ocean comes in, there's a sound. When the ocean goes out, there's a sound, and it was spot on.
It is, and I think you said it was like breathing, and I think it is like breathing. I think there's one of the things about the sea, and about dialogue, and about film, I think, and I really don't want to sound overly confident about the film. So much of this is serendipity, is happy accidents. You get the right team in place, and things happen in a way that you don't expect them on the day. I mean, particularly with low budget films, it's a lot to do with luck. But what a beautiful! I mean, I just the way in which Daisy's voice has a sort of breathy quality to it, has a beautiful breathing in and out quality to it. The sea breathes in and out, and there's a lot of space in the dialogue to allow the characters to breathe as well. And again, this is I've got to say, I've really got to give a big shout out to Tom Dalton, who from Brown Bear, who did our sound design, because he cared so much about the film. He actually got his wife and his business partner in to do an ADR track just to breathing, because he felt like there was some bits that needed it a bit more, that were missing, and you don't notice it. I mean, that's the talent of a great sound designer, is that you don't notice the work they've done at all. But when we watch it again without his magic, you really notice that depth isn't there. And one of the things I love about filmmaking, always have done, is they call it a collaborative art filmmaking, and there's something just so joyous about working with other people and having other people bring their talent to something and giving them the opportunity to really show their talent as well, which you can on an independent short film. You can just not hand it over, but you can say to, like, for example, Thomas, who did the sound design, like, watch this, respond to it, and then we'll talk. And that's just lovely. It's that really nice, and the same goes to the actors. If you cast brilliant people, then you're watching from the sidelines and occasionally giving coaching. You're not there on the pitch with them. It should be as much fun to watch them on location, I think, as it becomes for the eventual audience. So yeah, I mean, as you can tell, I'm a massive enthusiast. I wish I could do it all the time, but
No, I mean, this film is memorable, and that's what makes a great film. I want to go and talk about some of the scenes in this film, because the conversations between Joe and Katherine are so authentically real. And something caught my eye, because there's this turn in the film where Joe and Katherine are just sitting there. They're leaning up against that. They're sitting down, but they're leaning up against that concrete pylon. You know that
yeah,
scene?
yeah,
And this is where Joe tells Katherine that his father had died. And I found it to be a very interesting scene, because many may not understand the power of that actual conversation.
mm.
When Joe tells Katherine that his father died, and especially he got cancer and he died. But what a lot of people may not know, and I notice this within the dialogue, when one is diagnosed with cancer, some people, not everyone, some people are actually relieved.
Mm-hmm.
And in this film, his father suffered with depression. So getting cancer gave him a new lease on life. And of course, Joe mentioned that he started writing a novel. But because he suffered with depression, the perspective of knowing that he wouldn't be suffering from depression that much longer may have actually come as a relief. Any
Mm.
thoughts?
Wow, that's a very deep question. And once again, thank you so much for watching it with such detail. It's so lovely for me to finally talk to somebody who's not been part of the film. So thank you very much, Ward. I really do appreciate it. Um, yeah, so I have had uh, various experiences of grief in my life, and certainly I've seen people, and it does sound like an odd thing to say, but I think when people are, I think people fear death more than anything else, but once, and I think it's because I think the reason why people fear death probably is because more than anything, it represents a lack of control. What do we do in life? We seek control. It's human nature. We're all trying to control things. We like to have a diary of events in our calendar. We like to plot out our careers. There are certain things that we live with this idea that time is infinite, that we're going to go on forever, and we won't. And I think that when you are told that with some certainty that your life is going to end, that can be a huge relief, because I think it's finally saying, well, I don't have to live the lie anymore. The lie is that we live forever. That's the lie. And if you know that your time is limited, I think that can give some people a real sense of it's a gift for some people, because it means that they can finally put their lives in order, and they can say goodbye. I mean, this is it's a deep conversation to be having, Ward. But I was partly inspired, I think, by listening to a radio program where somebody was diagnosed with cancer, and they'd had a what they called a death party, and they had a funeral for all their friends and their family while they were still alive, and it was an incredibly joyous event, and all the people being interviewed were the people who were there, but obviously the person who had organised the party was no longer able to speak because they'd passed on. And I think there is just it's an underexplored thing in fiction, I think. This idea that you can get bad news, but for you it can be good news.
I think you found your next short film.
I think so, yeah.
Because when the lead character Joe, and this is still in that same scene, he said something very interesting about his father. He said he wanted to be a writer, but writing takes an act of faith. But what if you pour your heart out and no one relates, or you get bad reviews, or worse, you can't find an audience? That told me there's a spirit of fear. But that whole dialogue, doesn't that pretty much sum up the act of filmmaking?
Well, I was going to say, I mean, that one, I'll accept that bit's biographical. Of course it is. I think anybody who seeks to make art of any sort does so out of a need to do it. But the strange thing about all art, I think, is that it doesn't fully exist until you've got an audience. So whilst I will say that the work that I do, the art I do, the writing that doesn't see the light of day that I do is valuable to me, it's a lovely process, and I believe in the process. I absolutely believe in the process. Is it art until someone else has read it? Is it art until there's an audience reaction to it? And increasingly, there's a lot of noise out there. It's really hard to get somebody to sit down and watch a film. It's hard to get exposure at film festivals. It's hard to you put a huge amount of love, frankly, into making something, and you want a reaction, whether it's a good reaction or a bad reaction. You just want some kind of reaction, because without that, it doesn't exist. I don't think.
No, you're absolutely right, and that really brings me to this other scene in the film, and it was kind of funny, because as I was watching it, the very moment this scene started, it wasn't based on dialogue; it was based on the music score. So there's this scene where the music starts this slow climactic climb when Katherine, played by Maddie Rice, proposes the question, "Are you happy?" I literally stopped the film before she said the line, and I went, "Something's coming." because I could tell by the tone of the music. I said, okay, it's climbing, something is coming. So rewound back to the start to listen to the music again and then let the scene play out. And then when she says, "Are you happy?" He said it was a big question, but she also avoided that question as well. Many people today have a very hard time answering what appears on the surface as an easy question, but when you
Mm.
finally get somebody to say or ask them, "Are you happy?" it's silence. And I just thought that was just an amazing scene.
Oh, thank you. Yes, my sister watched the film, and she knew nothing about it, and she pinpointed that line as well. And it's funny because I I hadn't I hadn't noticed it. I'm being honest. I hadn't noticed it, and I think it's because it's a question that I was familiar with. So familiar with growing up. People ask, "Are you happy?" And it's sort of it's like it's a slightly deeper, but it's the same as when people say, "How are you?" Isn't it? How are you? I'm fine. And it's almost a greeting. But it is actually a really deep question. That I always think that's a really deep
But the
question.
scene was deep because Joe didn't just come out and go, "Yes, I'm happy," or "No, I'm not happy." He basically avoided the question.
Yeah, he put it back on her, didn't he? It's like and then she avoided the question as well. And I think there is a lot of subtext in there, isn't there? Because it's like also happiness is deeply personal, and I think sometimes people ask, "Are you happy?" in the hope that they are somehow accountable for your happiness. They are somehow um, going to get some kind of you know. My nan used to ask my mum all the time, "Are you happy?" Oh, good. It's like sort of like because then she's done her job, hasn't she? If a mother's job is done if their children are happy,
Yeah, but
and so you
yeah,
ask,
because they're both reconnecting. And that question for each of them wasn't really about what had happened the time apart. It was really it was a question that was too big for both of them.
definitely, yeah,
Because he I don't want to say he was skipping through life. He was an actor. uh, she was very grounded, married. She had a life. She had really no reason to actually reconnect.
mm,
But I was so glad that the storyline was that these two friends from the past reconnected. And I'm not going to give away uh, a, a very important part of this film. I want people to watch it and I want to see if people catch it. Catherine says that she was hoping that there was a possibility, but he says you're bored. And I sat there like I got hit by a ton of bricks. I was like, people need to watch that scene and really take a deep breath and grasp the magnitude of that scene. Because, and that's exactly what happens when some people go astray. They're bored. But that scene, wow. Because as you wrote this, you were, there was this, I'm not going to call it tension. I don't know what the true definition would be, but there was this lingering feeling of emotion for the audience that they're riding upon in this whole film. And then you bring it together towards the end and you're like, yeah, but I'm glad that the line was never crossed.
absolutely, yeah, yes, very important that to me. Because I think, again, I mean, I'm a great believer in friendship as well, and there can be chemistry between friends, but that doesn't need to lead to anything beyond the love of friendship, I think. And again, I feel like, I mean, you're picking up on everything. You're so so intuitive.
Well,
It's brilliant.
but see, you brought up something because this is something that I was noticing in the very beginning of the film. My question to myself was, can an adult man and an adult woman actually be friends? And this is the type of film that secretly explores that.
Mm-hmm.
What made Shouting at the Sea a pure, simple, and brilliant film is that you kept both characters in their respective places. He's
Mm-hmm.
single, she's married, but no lines were crossed, and I thank you for that.
Well, I mean, I think it would have been a complete different film without it. If it had been a different ending would not have made the film satisfying, would it? I mean, I think it, it's it's a it really is a story about it's a story about the human condition. Really, is what it's about. We've got everything in it. We've got friendship, we've got love, we've got family off screen. We've got the eternal nature of the sea, and but again, I tell you one of the things that I know. I'm so glad you watched it and appreciated it. I really am. I can't tell you the one of the boldest things I think we did with this film was try to keep it subtle and try to keep it what it needed to be, and not make play to an imaginary audience who might want something different. It's a story of real characters, and we wanted it to be as real as possible.
The subtlety is what made this film brilliant. And I think one of the best scenes that really highlights that subtlety is when they're sitting in the pub.
Yes.
Not a whole lot of dialogue, but you feel it's kind of like with two friends reconnect after many, many years. There's the small talk. Nothing deep. It's more of like putting your toes in the water to see, is it cold? Is it warm? Do I go deeper? That's exactly what this dance was.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what made this so beautiful. The timing, the pacing. The other thing that I noticed was the framing of the
Mm-hmm.
characters in every frame. You kept them framed so perfectly. You kept them contained because the conversation was private.
Mm-hmm.
And even
Yeah.
if you look outside the two characters in the scenes, you rarely see another person.
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
and I think that's one of those little things that not everybody's going to notice, but it's my job to notice. And but I think, and it played so well, Benjamin. Oh my gosh! I mean, as I was watching it, I was almost thinking, could this be a feature film?
Oh, wow. I mean, I would love it if we could make it into a feature film. I mean, I think that's that was one of the goals of making the film, was to try and do something that had the level of production that I want to bring to a feature film. Realistically, it's likely to be an independent film. It's likely to be low budget, but I wanted to see what we could do in 20 minutes and work out, can we extend that to 90 minutes or less. Interesting. I must say that the framing of the actors. Thank you for bringing that up. I think again, this is to do, I think, with when you get the right people on location, something magic happens. And Tom, our cinematographer, when we went out on the recce before we'd cast Maddie and Harry, we had sort of imagined quite a few bigger, wider shots, imagined probably fairly standard, establishing shots and so on. But as soon as we were working with the actors, Tom took me to one side and said, "Look, we've got to put the 85 on for all of this, pretty much." And it's funny because obviously we spent quite a lot of money on locations and so on, and pretty much, we're in tight close up the entire time. There is some relief. I'm sure the audience will be pleased to know, and we do see the sea and the town, which is obviously a character as well. But if you're given the gift of two actors who can emote. I mean, one of the things that the thing that made me want to be a filmmaker in the first place, when I was a child, I was really into Charles Chaplin, weirdly. But what he taught me, and I didn't know he was teaching it me at the time, but what he taught me was that beautiful word pathos, the ability to have tragedy and comedy blended in a way that tells you so much more about humanity than bawdy comedy or dramatic drama. And, Harry and Maddie have it in abundance. They're just, it was so hard to edit in a way because you just wanted to linger on both of them at all times. There was so many choices to be made about whether Maddie's reaction to Harry talking about his dad dying, for example, you feel so much more by watching her listening to him sometimes than him saying, and it shouldn't. As I say, it's the first rule of acting. Acting is reacting. Yet, I feel like a lot of modern films still just give us action.
You're right. You're right. And that's the thing that bugs me about the films probably for the last, I don't know, maybe almost 10 years. The film studios are giving us films where we don't have to use our brain.
Mm-hmm.
It's there for entertainment, but it's gotten to the point that the entertainment is now white noise because half the time we're looking at our phone if it's streaming during the
Absolutely.
film. But with a film like this, I can literally sit here and think of the films that I could relate to by watching this one. I mean, you have Kramer versus Kramer.
Mm-hmm.
You have Harry Met Sally, Sleeping in Seattle, Sleepless in Seattle. The list goes on. We need more of this.
I think so. I mean, there are some unbelievably brilliant films out there at the moment. I will defend some, some of it. I think that the saw a beautiful film recently, Paul Giamatti and the Holdovers. I don't know whether you've seen that, but that was a beautiful film. And I think
The Holdovers with Paul Giamatti.
Yeah,
loved it.
That was
my favorite film of last year.
Oh, well, there you go. We're simpatico. I was going to say that there are some insanely brilliant films being made still. I mean, I don't know how much exposure it got really, but that's a film. I'd love to emulate. I'd love to make a feature film like that. That's what we would. Obviously, Shouting at the Sea is a very different film, but I think there's certain qualities that are similar in that we're talking about real human beings with real ordinary struggles, to be perfectly honest. Everybody, they again, they say everyone's got a story to tell. And I can't remember who said it, but it's a beautiful quote that says something like, there's nothing more painful than not being able to tell the story inside you.
Oh, and, yeah. Because when I think about this film, I would almost not want it to be a feature because you would have to add characters, and it would ruin. It would ruin the privacy. Of the two characters, the intimacy of dialogue, and again, there is no fault to this film. I mean, I know that this film is is going to appear at Holly Shorts, which is phenomenal. Did that shock you?
Yeah, it did totally. Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think, uh, I mean, it's a huge honour to be selected for Holly Shorts, and it's a great festival. I mean, of course, as someone who's into film, Hollywood's a mecca. Whether it should be or not, I don't know. But what a fantastic opportunity to go to Hollywood and actually sit in a cinema and watch the film with people who aren't already invested in it. I mean, that's going to be such a joy. And I feel really bad because you mentioned music earlier, and I haven't given a shout out to our brilliant composer Richie Johnson. The Again, it's one of those things that you sort of, the best compliment I think you can give a film composer is to say, I love your soundtrack and I listened to it on a CD, but I didn't notice it in the film. Because, the best, John Williams or whoever, but the very best film composers are the ones where, while you're watching the film, you don't notice the music. The music's just there and it just helps you. It doesn't tell you what to think, but somehow it it enhances and elevates the scenery, the acting, and so on. And we were so lucky. He's a recent graduate of the Royal College of Music. I think he's going to have an amazing career. But just it's so lovely to work with other people. I mean, this as I say, this is the joy. It's a collaborative art. You can't, much as I'd like to take credit for all of it, I think that what I do take credit for is bringing together the right team to make the film, and it's a rare thing to be able to do, and a total privilege to be able to do.
It's fantastic. And I mean, what's next for you?
Well, we've got to pay for the film, so there's a bit of work to be done with our clients, but we're working on a feature film. I keep telling people that I think we've got the right ingredients, but we haven't quite got the recipe right yet for it. But my wife, who's a co-producer and a co-writer on Shouting at the Sea, along with Ruth and Kate, my colleagues, Amelia is a phenomenal sculptor. If you want to look her up afterwards, her name's Amelia Rowcroft, and she's an insanely good sculptor. Obviously, I'm biased, but other people tell us that's true as well. And together, I've made with her. I've made quite a few instructional sculpting films, and there's something very, very beautiful about clay and about creating the form, human form in clay. It's a very, very cinematic, process actually, because you're building up someone from within. So you start, rather than carving away to block with clay, you build it up. And we've been talking about how can we do something cinematic with this for ages. And funnily enough, it was when we were watching The Holdovers together. Amelia said to me, I love these sort of films which are about mentors and mentees. But why is the mentor always an old white man with a beard? And we had continued to have this conversation for a little while. And then I was like, well, hang on a minute. What better place to have intimate conversation and the sort of conversation you might have with a therapist or a psychotherapist than a sculpting studio, because you have this very intimate relationship between the sculptor and the model. And so then we started thinking about that, and we're trying to write a film that follows in the tradition of things like Good Will Hunting and The Holdovers and other films like that, but where the main characters are women, and we show women in roles that are traditionally taken by white bearded men, I guess.
White older bearded men, it's usually the thought of wisdom.
That's right, exactly. Yeah.
Unless you have the voice of Morgan Freeman, then you can just sound like you've got wisdom all the time.
Right.
But with women, it's funny because I'm thinking, okay, you've got Helen Mirren, Judi
Yeah.
Dench, Viola Davis. You could go with Glenn Close. The list goes on. Well, Meryl Streep, I guess, too.
I absolutely. I mean, and there's there are thankfully more roles for women these days than there used to be. But I still think there could be more. And I also there's a going back to what you were saying about choosing the voice of the sea being a woman with Daisy. I also think in, the script could have been written read out by Morgan Freeman, couldn't it? Or somebody with that sort of gravitas, traditional gravitas voice. But there's no reason why. It's only because we've been told that's the voice of wisdom over and over again. And I'm interested. The team I've got are all female at the moment, so I have a lot of writing partners to help me get that authentic voice across in writing this screenplay. And I do believe in it. I think that it's I think it will. I think it's the right step after Shouting at the Sea, where you've got this lovely, intimate, ongoing conversation between two 30-year-olds. Now let's see if what we can do with a sculptor and their model and resolving each of their
I can't wait to see it because it's funny because we think of The Old Man and the Sea,
yeah.
but all ships are named after women.
That's what they are. They certainly are. Yeah.
So, but again, Daisy was the perfect choice. I love seeing more films where we have a female lead, and Maddie was an excellent choice, a very strong lead in Shouting at the Sea. Ladies and gentlemen, Benjamin Verrall's newest film, a beautiful short called Shouting at the Sea, is about two friends, Joe and Katherine, reconnecting after years apart. They spend the day in the teenage haunts of the seaside town where they grew up, but together they confront the past, share who they've become, and finally conclude the conversation that tore them apart. Witness to this human drama is the sea, again voiced by Daisy Haggard. She remains indifferent, yet it's waves of the ocean, narrating a tale of memory, belonging, and vulnerability. Now, Shouting at the Sea, again, and I can say it over and over again, a beautiful, brilliant film from the storytelling, the narration, the acting of Harry Mitchell and Maddie Rice, and of course, the narration of Daisy Haggard, to the absolute wonderful cinematography, the framing, the music score. But when you get the opportunity to see it, please do so because it is a truly wonderful experience. Benjamin, I want to thank you so much. I was absolutely excited that you were coming on, and so that way we could just talk about this amazing film.
Well, I'd love to say thank you ever so much for the opportunity, and I applaud you for having this platform for filmmakers to talk about their craft. As I say, we loved seeing the other videos that were on YouTube, and it's a great way to hear other voices of filmmakers. So thank you.
Well, you're very, very welcome. And ladies and gentlemen, again, when you have the opportunity, because Shouting at the Sea is going to be shown at Holly Shorts Film Festival, a premier Oscar qualifying film festival with over 6,000 entries and only 400 were chosen. So this is a very special time for Shouting at the Sea. Look, I believe in film, and I think all film should be cinematic. Now, of course, not all film is, and there's a reason for that. But this one falls into that perfect category of film that we need more of. I mean, if you feel that there's something missing in your life, it's probably because you haven't seen Shouting at the Sea yet. So it's time that when you have that opportunity, because it's in the film festival circuit now, but when you get the opportunity, or if you do get to attend a film festival and Shouting at the Sea is appearing, that's the one to see. So ladies and gentlemen, well, you can catch all of the replays of our interviews with the top film directors, producers, screenwriters, actors, and more on Bond on Cinema. I want to thank you for watching, and as for me, I'll either see you at the movies or from the red carpet.